Before I go into my research topics, I'd like to, however, congratulate you to come this far, advisor. This is extraordinary years filled with anxiety, deep sense of loss, pain, anger, and we still don't know what the new semester will bring. But I think one part I am really certain, and you should be, is the fact that we at Vassar, meaning faculty, students, staff members, are really excited to have you here. And so we can start our adventure together. So today I'm going to also tell you something about my own adventure. This is a new system for me, so I'm still navigating. It is sad that I cannot see you, but I think by clicking open this link, you already told me something about you. First of all, you're curious. You're curious about the world beyond what are you familiar with, and how the world is looking at remote places like China. Or maybe you come from China, then we'll still be interested to understand how the world is understanding China's experience. You also have deep care about the environment and our place in it. So I think the sense of curiosity about the outside world and the sense of care are something has motivated me for all these years to pursue discipline in geography. Geography as a discipline is not familiar to many of you, I think. I was a geography major. I'm still a geographer, so I've been here for a long time. I'm going to tell you something about this discipline and how we're doing research in it. So I like to just start sharing again. So geography, humanity, and environment are something we consider. So what is geography? Geography is trying to understand the pattern of humanity across the world, right? And how it impacts people, society, and places. So it is an integrated social science. That means we borrow from a lot of different science, social analysis to understand what's unfolding on the ground. And in this department, there are different specializations. I myself called my economic geographer. So I teach a class of space of global capitalism, which I'm offering this semester. And I hope as you move to sophomore years or even later, you could take this class, which we try to understand how globalizing economic activities are unfolding, what motivate them, and how it's affect people and places. So I think it's extremely relevant for our world today. We have other professors in geography, such as Marianne Cunningham. She studied agriculture. Professor Godfrey studied cities and gentrification. Professor Joan Nevin studied social justice and human rights. And what connects us together is really a sense of space, spatial perspective in analyzing these social phenomena. I also teach another course called Environmental China, which I offer in the spring semester. It is a course which we try to understand, how the environmental problems take forms in China throughout the centuries and how Chinese is dealing with their environment and what are some of the successes and what are some of the failures. And this sort of connect to the area that I want you most to think about is the international collaborations. So, and what is about climate change. Unfortunately, US-China relations are in deep, deep trouble, and as it's never been in the last 40 years. I think, however, it has more to do with narrow mind politicians want to spread hate to score point rather than, the deep desire of the population. And despite the troubled reality, I think I still have a lot of faith in international collaboration. For one thing, we have to collaborate. None of the countries have ability to edit other out of the earth. And therefore, we have to coexist, and we actually need each other for the civilization to succeed. And from a student perspective, I think learning about how China dealing with the environment is really, really helpful to understand different alternative systems and to understand the lessons as well as success, and to understand what it takes to deal with some of the environmental issues. So one of the concrete ways I deal with international collaboration is in the last few years, I have led a project funded by Luce Foundation called the Asia Initiative, Luce Initiative on Asia and the Environment. I'm going to show you a 5 minutes video about activities we did in 2019, and had there not been pandemics, we would have bring students and faculty to Wuhan. And now you all know about Wuhan, or not knowing about Wuhan besides the pandemic. So I want to just show you some of the activity we did, and I'll make some comments after the video. So let's start here. Here you go.
Funded by Luce Initiative of Asian Studies and the Environment, LIAS, with the supplemental grant from Vassar. The Vassar-LIAS program organized a series of activities to enhance understanding of Asia in environmental research. One of the major activities is the annual summer research workshop in China, collaborating with environmental researchers in Chinese universities. During May 27 to June 9, 2019, Vassar-LIAS summer workshop took place in Shanghai. We had a team of 5 professors and 8 students. We conducted on-site research in collaboration with faculty and students at East China Normal University. The workshop focused on coastal processes with projects such as microplastic extraction and processing in Chongming Island, toxic chemical in Chongming Island sediment, coastal invasive seagrass studies, NGO and environmental activism, aquaculture and the Eagle Farm complex in the vicinity of major metropolitan center, and green building construction in Shanghai.
One of our biggest dedications was to obtain a 100-year record of sediment deposition from Chongming Island. With the help of Professor Zhongyuan Chen and his students, we managed to obtain core and some surface sediments to analyze the microplastic and heavy metal content. We learned coring and processing the sample, including measuring, cutting, labeling, and packaging.
We visited several different rural communities, such as a collective in Chongming, fish and shrimp farms, as well as talking to farmers in their orchards and seeing their houses. We learned about China's rural economy today, its diverse organizations, and economic and ecological practices. We met with different environmental NGOs working in different areas. We were impressed by the love of their home communities and the effort they made to protect their environment. We visited different wetlands in Lingang and Minheng, Chongming districts in Shanghai and Hangzhou. We learned about the invasive species and controls, but also realized that this issue is more complicated than we had thought. We observed that many exotic species were introduced to the coastal areas for landscaping and other purposes. Moreover, we wondered how to define an invasive species, as China's wetlands and coast have been historically disturbed for centuries and are currently under tremendous change.
We also visited several green building sites under the guidance of local architects to see the climate-appropriate practices in Shanghai. We were fascinated by Shanghai's household trash and recycling campaign. All over Shanghai, we noticed propaganda posters and Chinese social media discussing this program. We were also invited to participate in class discussions with Chinese students. We attended a course called Observations of Environmental Issues at the ECNU School of Ecological and Environmental Sciences. We made friends with one of the students named Nora, and we later went to see her campaign for President of the University Student Association, and Vassar students celebrated with her after she won the election.
Well, I really appreciated the opportunity to travel to Shanghai with Professor Yu Zhou. I am particularly interested in the fate of microplastic particles in sediments, and one of the purposes of my going to Shanghai was to meet with colleagues at East China Normal University who are working on microplastics in fine-grained sediments there. I visited the lab of Professor He and got a chance to see the technology and procedures that they use for working with microplastics. In particular, I was very impressed with the facilities they have. One of the things I was able to do was collect muddy samples from Chanming Island with my student, and are currently working with them. We are hopeful that we will be able to isolate the microplastics and quantify them so that we have a sense of how much microplastic input there is coming from the Yangtze into the delta around Shanghai.
Okay, I hope you enjoy it. Okay, I wanted to just provide some reflections in this video. So you heard about microplastics, right? So this is a newspaper that has in Poughkeepsie Journal, right, talk about plastic rain now falling across in the United States. So what we're really thinking about is that we have problems that are globalized. Microplastic is one of them. But we also have localized solutions. That how do you understand what are these plastics and how do you stop them from multiplying? In China, in 2008, they have started to ban plastic in supermarket. We're doing it this year. However, China has shown there's some problems that the enforcement not at a big market, but a small market. So we're going to see similar problems here. So we can study these localized solutions to understand better what we can do when we're facing these problems. And the second point I want to mention is that the field observation matters. You could read books, you could really listen to great lectures, but nothing beats the field. I feel really, really sad with the pandemic has reduced our ability to conduct field studies. I'm hoping that we will eventually able to do so. So it was amazing to see how the student and faculty encounter unfamiliar landscape in China and realize what we have learned in the past, take for granted, it's being shattered. For example, in the United States, it's relatively easy to define what is invasive species because we have Columbus as the dividing points, right? And so before that it was indigenous, after that it was exotic and invasive. But there is no such point in China to divide that indigenous versus exotic, and the coastal lines as well as the landscape has been changed over the centuries. So how would we think about defining what is invasive species? The kind of question you would not have asked had you not been in the city. So, and they also learn a lot about trash recycling and things like that. We just happened to be camping at the time. And in this year, our plan was going to Wuhan to look at the food production. Again, this had very different localized system that in the United States, we're used to a commercialized system of large monoculture, and we're produce abundant food and very cheap. In China, there isn't so much land, so the system evolved there is the farmer wanted to combine different crops in small piece of land so they can feed each other in terms of ecology and produce a certain farm ecodiversity, and also produce income in several streams of income. So that's kind of system is fascinating for us if we think about global growth of population, demand for nutrition, as well as the environmental sustainability. And the last part of green building is actually the area of my own research. So as you see on the film, we brought several different scientists. I am actually a social science, so my own research in geography is on social science. So green building are the building which minimize the environmental footprint. So we use less energy and also minimize water consumption and so on. So there are really interesting technologies that has been growing quite maturely. This summer, I was so excited. We finally, at my house, were able to install a geothermal heating and cooling system. About 5 years ago, we had a solar panel put in, and 2 years earlier, we had insulation. So I know these technologies, I've been using it, and I think they're all very mature and exciting. So with the solar power generated by my house, at least this summer, I could claim that I will not using any fossil fuel in my house consumption. And I think the question really is that the technology is around, but why aren't people using it? What are the policy and from the government? And how do companies, they're trying to be encouraged to develop these technology, how the public became consumers of the low carbon technology are the questions I'm wrestling with, right? I'm wrestling with that in China, how China could promote green building. But China actually have a lot more green building than the rest of the world combined. But what we learn in China will also have implications elsewhere. So that's what I want to say is basic. I think really it's important in the time you come to college is to explore different horizons, go to disciplines that may not sound familiar to you, because you will find you have sense of discovery, find interesting things that may stimulate your imagination, help you decide who you want to be and what you want to do. So I think if you wanted to know more about Vasilia's project, which the video is talking about, please go to the page. And I also, these are the places which has the video and my own email. You could shoot me an email, make appointment. We can talk about over Zoom, and or hopefully we'll meet you in person. So thank you very much.